Devastation from California's wildfires. You know, they're still raging on both ends of that state. As you can see in these live pictures, the president just landed in Chico in Northern California. He's at the municipal airport there. The president meeting with firefighters and state officials as the death toll so far has risen to at least 71 people, and at least 1,100 people remain unaccounted for. Hello, everyone, and welcome to America's News Headquarters. I'm Eric Shaw.
And I'm Arthel Neville as we look at this live shot there at Chico Municipal Airport as President Trump is on the ground planning to see the destruction firsthand and to meet with some of the victims. Before heading to California today, the president praised the work of firefighters who are working around the clock on the front lines, and he also doubled down on blaming fire management for the destruction.
White House correspondent Kevin Corke is live in Paradise, California, Northern California. Kevin, we're watching the video and the images live now of the president arriving, meeting with the first responders and the others. It is some scene of devastation. He will see just a wide swath of what has turned out to be unmitigated carnage.
Incredible devastation, Eric. You hit the nail on the head. This is a circumstance that we've seen play out, unfortunately, on a number of occasions here in the Golden State. In fact, before making his way here, you may have noticed online the president was talking about on Twitter who he would bring along with him to sort of continue the conversation here in the Golden State. In fact, let me take you to Twitter very quickly and just share a bit of what he said. He said, heading to California with GOP leader Kevin McCarthy, Representative Lamafala, and obviously Ken Calvert. Look forward to being with our brave firefighters, first responders, and FEMA, along with the many brave people of California. We are with you all the way. God bless you all. Indeed, once on the ground, the president left quickly from Beale Air Force Base to begin a tour of the areas. As you pointed out, making his way over to Chico here within the last several minutes. Obviously, this area has been hit by devastating wildfires. Those fires, Eric, have claimed the lives of dozens of Californians. Hundreds more missing, perhaps as many as 1,000 still missing, as officials now begin the arduous task of going door to door. This is a recurring problem, the wildfires, that is, and it's one that the president says that state and federal authorities need to do a better job of managing.
You got some blowback because one of your tweets was you said there's poor forest management.
Only because I tell the truth. When trees fall, they get very dry. They're like tinder. They're like matchsticks, right? You got to remove them. You got to remove them.
What about the argument it's climate change, that it's drier, it's hotter, and that's contributing to it?
Maybe it contributes a little bit. The big problem we have is management.
Well, obviously, we want to make sure that you watch more of Chris's interview with the President of the United States. That comes your way tomorrow on Fox News Sunday. Be sure to check your local listings for the time in your area. We will expect to have much more on the president's visit here to the Golden State of California. Eric and Arthel, as we hear what he has to say, we will take special note of the time that he spends here on the ground. You may have heard earlier today, he said, look, I want to stay here as long as I can to show the people of California that we, as all Americans, are with them, and he hopes to give them as much support as they need. Eric?
All right, Kevin. We'll have live coverage, of course, all through the afternoon. Thank you. Arthel.
And Eric, for more on this now, Michael Moeller, Deputy Director of the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, CAL FIRE, joins me now on the phone. Mr. Moeller, welcome, first of all, and thank you for taking time out of what I can't even imagine what your schedule is like. And I understand that you're actually in Chico. You're not at the municipal airport where the president has just landed. But I do want to start and ask you, how do you feel about the president's visit? Is it better for him to see the devastation and witness the grief firsthand? And also, is the timing okay or a bit inconvenient?
Well, I think for the president to be here, and again, thank you for having us, it's an educational opportunity for him to be on the ground and see the devastation firsthand, and actually exactly what the fire agencies here in California are doing, and the devastation to the citizens of California.
Mr. Moeller?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can now. Continue your thoughts, sir.
Yeah, no, so it's very important that the president...
Okay. Mr. Moeller, I beg your pardon. What you have to say is incredibly important to us. So if you would bear with us, give us a moment to get your signal stronger. And if you can hang on for us, we'll get back to you shortly. Would that be okay, sir, if you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Guys, can we get Mr. Mueller's signal straight, and let's move on for the time being? Is that possible? All right, and meanwhile, we're still looking at these shots here. As I said, Mr. Mueller, who is the deputy director for the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, Eric, we're looking at shots here where the president had landed in California earlier. And as we know, in advance of his trip, as we're looking at these scenes that just seem, pictures that seem so unreal, we're looking at these pictures. They look like, from a movie, but it's very real there in California, not a set. And the president, ahead of this, hours after the first fire broke out, he was very critical of forest management there. And that is one of the questions I do want to ask Mr. Mueller as the deputy director of the California Department of Forestry there, if he has any thoughts on that and his feeling about the president's comments on that. He's very strong in saying, listen, guys, you got to take care of the overgrown forest in order to prevent fires like this. So I do plan to ask him about that. But it does appear, I asked Mr. Mueller at the gate, as you heard, Eric, how does he feel about the president coming here?
Clearly, well, when the president comes, clearly important, as he said, for the commander-in-chief to see it firsthand. And the president has come under some criticism for those comments, but there's a commission in California called the Little La Hoover Commission that did blame what they called a century of mismanagement in the Sierra Nevada area in terms of the wildfire and forest mismanagement, it claimed, calling it an imminent crisis, and that potentially is some of the issues that we're seeing today, as well as the fact that you've got climate change, urban areas, and other issues.
Yeah, and I understand we have Mr. Michael Mueller. He's the Deputy Director of California Department of Forestry and CAL FIRE back on the phone. So, Mr. Mueller, again, I want to ask you, as the Deputy Director of the California Department of Forestry and CAL FIRE there, how did you receive the president's tweets of threats of withholding federal funding because of forest mismanagement?
Well, I think really the focus is not on the politics, but on what we're dealing with here in California and the devastating fires we're dealing with right now. As far as on the federal land, yes, there's always a need for improvement on forests, but I can tell you the state of California, CAL FIRE, along with Governor Brown's support with the executive order and the Forest Management Task Force, we have always been a leader in forest management with prescribed fires. So I think this will be an educational opportunity for all to see actually what we do in California, but the focus is on the people that have lost their homes and ultimately the people that have lost their lives in their tragedy.
Of course, no doubt that is definitely the focus. I do, though, want to follow up with a question here for you and ask you, would you like to restructure the department in any way, and how might the president be able to assist?
Well, I couldn't get into restructuring. I think our agency, again, a leader in not only protecting the lives and property of California, but CAL FIRE, again, has been doing this. This is our mission, and we continue to excel at it. So
no need for redirecting in any way in terms of how the upkeep of the forest there. Listen, let me be very clear, sir. In no way am I implying at all that there's mismanagement on your part. I'm just asking these questions because the president did make the statement. So I know you're very busy.
Totally
and you don't want to really
understand.
talk about this right now, but go ahead, sir.
Yeah, no, I would say on behalf of Chief Ken Pamela and Governor Brown's administration, and as first responders, that's something we should do on a daily basis.
What would you like the president to say to firefighters, to residents, while on the ground there in California? All right, Mr. Mueller.
And then also, are you there?
Sir, I really want to really apologize to you. You are doing incredible work out there. You are manning forces of so many firefighters who are doing their level best to keep the people there now somehow sane and protected from any further devastation, and dealing with the cleanup, with the loss of loved ones, with the loss of livelihoods. As we look at these incredible images here, we thank you for taking your time to speak with us. Continued success in trying your best to manage a very overwhelming situation. Mr. Michael Mueller, Deputy Director of California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, CAL FIRE.
And meanwhile, there's another big story we're following at this hour, the recount in Florida continuing. Election officials there are examining tens of thousands of ballots in a hand recount of the hotly contested Senate race. Republican Governor Rick Scott now holding a slim lead over Democratic incumbent Senator Bill Nelson as the new deadline looms for tomorrow. Peter Ducey is live in Lauderhill, Florida, with much more on how that counting is going. Hi, Peter.
Eric, Democratic lawyers representing Democratic Senator Bill Nelson are outraged inside right now because there are 2,000 ballots that somehow went missing between Election Day and when the recounts started, and the supervisor of elections, Brenda Snipes, does not have much guidance for them.
The ballots are in the building. The ballots are in the buildings. Somebody must have put their stack in a tray where it didn't belong, and we didn't pick that up. So we continue to count. What we can do is go back and recount. The ballots are in this building. There would be nowhere else for them to be, but they are misfiled.
But if those ballots happen to turn up and the rules are bent so they are counted, despite the fact that the machine recount total here was rejected since it was submitted 2 minutes late, they aren't likely to change the outcome here because the hand recount in Broward only helped Bill Nelson get 274 votes closer. He's down to more than 12,000 plus ballots in second place behind Republican Governor Rick Scott. That means the 5,000 plus ballots that could possibly be fixed by 5 p.m. today because the signatures don't match aren't going to be enough to boost Bill Nelson in the first place either, even if they're all returned and all picked Bill Nelson for Senate. Another setback for the Democrats' effort to win a fourth term came in court late last night when a judge denied a request to count thousands of votes that didn't turn up in the mailbox by 7 p.m. on Election Day as required. But maybe the biggest issue here in Broward for Nelson was undervoting. People who picked candidates in different races but left the Senate race blank, and there is already some blame swirling around that maybe the reason there were so many undervotes is a confusing ballot design. Eric.
All right, Peter. It will continue, and we'll have the deadline tomorrow. Thank you. For more on all this, David Smiley joins us. He's a political reporter at the Miami Herald. So, David, we just heard about the 2,000 votes that are missing. Ms. Snipes says that there's somewhere in the building. I mean, how does this instill confidence, integrity, and credibility in the election system there if they've got 2,000 votes and ballots that, frankly, they don't know where they are?
Well, it doesn't. It's just more bad optics for Brenda Snipes and her staff. To some extent, I think we've seen with this recount how much manpower is involved. We have machines tabulating hundreds of thousands of ballots in Broward County, but you also have to have people feeding the machines, moving ballots, people who in some cases haven't had much sleep. So on one hand, it's not that surprising that somebody might misplace something. On the other, the idea that Brenda Snipes' office would recount all of her ballots and actually have a less accurate count is a little bit troubling. Yeah,
at least 3,000 votes apparently were the mismatch with the machines when they ran them through the machines again, too. And we're looking live as that process continues. So what do you think they should do in terms of restoring credibility and the complete trust of the voting public in the ability to do their job?
Well, I don't know that Brenda Snipes can restore her credibility at this point. I think that's shot, and I think it's irreparable. I think what her office can do to restore faith in the vote count there is to try to find those ballots. And if they can't find them, they may. It sounds like the canvassing board, the sort of little-known body there, and there are 67 of them across the state that actually officiate the elections countings, that they have the autonomy to either go with the machine tabulations, the recount numbers, or maybe go back to the old numbers. They have some discretion, I believe, but it's going to be a problem for them if they're looking to turn new numbers into the state and they have a gap of thousands of ballots that they somehow misplaced.
So what do you think they're going to do? What do you think they're going to do tomorrow?
I have no idea. It's going to be fascinating to watch, but watching Brenda Snipes' office the last week and a half has been a train wreck.
Yeah, finally, I mean, if Rick Scott does pull this off, you now have Ron DeSantis as the Republican governor, a potential Republican senator. So how does that tip Florida and affect it for 2020 when President Trump assumably will run for re-election?
Well, Rick Scott's going to pull it out. I think we saw that Bill Nelson's path to try to make up that gap has closed on a bunch of fronts. And so I think unless he's going to sue to challenge the results of the election, at this point, it's over. For Florida, you know, 2 Republican U.S. senators, Governor Ron DeSantis, very close with Donald Trump. For Floridians who believe that Florida is a swing state, I think it's a bit of a blow to them. Obviously, it's a very divided state, but in midterm elections, Florida has voted Republican for governor and in the state legislature for 2 decades plus now. So Republicans have a very strong grip on the state. In presidential elections, I still think it can go either way, but this state is a conservative state when it comes to the state government.
Yeah, and believe it or not, Senator Nelson is the last statewide elected Democrat who's been in office, or at least the last Democrat since 1972. So you have had the switch and the more of the red state Republican support in your state, not just up in the Panhandle.
Well, now Democrats can likely cling to having the state agriculture commissioner as their lone statewide elected Democrat, and some in the party are claiming victory based on that, but that's kind of low expectations for the Democrats if they feel good.
And there's some questions about that with that count that we're continuing.
It's likely she'll pull that out as well, but sure, that's the closest race of the 3 that went to the statewide recounts.
All right, well, we'll see what happens tomorrow. And, of course, by next Tuesday, they should be certified by the Secretary of State, which will likely be the final decision unless the lawyers get back into it. David Smiley, thank you so much.
Eric, there are new developments on the U.S. southern border as the first group of so-called caravan migrants arrived there seeking asylum. We'll have a live look at the challenges being faced in Tijuana. Plus, President Trump says he has completed his written answers to Special Counsel Robert Mueller's questions and will submit them next week. A live report and analysis straight ahead.
It's just a continuation. You can go. There should have never been any Mueller investigation. From what I hear, it's ending. And I'm sure it'll be just fine. And you know why it's going to?
Hi, Eric. The president often criticizes the special counsel. No secret there. And he often calls their investigation a witch hunt. On Twitter this week, he did it again and called Robert Mueller's team a disgrace to our nation. The series of tweets and the president's new acting attorney general raised concern among Democrats. House Democrats say they want the omnibus bill to include language protecting the special counsel.
The special counsel cannot be fired without cause. He or she would be granted a 3-judge appeal panel. If fired, could only be removed by a Senate-confirmed AG, replaced by a Senate-confirmed Attorney General or top Senate-confirmed Justice Department official.
President Trump forced out Jeff Sessions as Attorney General and named Matt Whitaker acting Attorney General. Democrats say Whitaker's appointment violates the Appointments Clause of the Constitution and is also problematic because in the past, Whitaker has publicly criticized the special counsel. The president says his special counsel tweets were not prompted by anything in particular, and after months of back and forth, he says he's finished answering written questions from the special counsel's team. President Trump told reporters he personally answered about 140 questions, and he says they will be submitted next week.
I've answered them very easily, very easily. I'm sure they're tricked up because, you know, they like to catch people. Gee, you know, was the weather sunny or was it rainy? He said it may have been a good day. It was rainy. Therefore, he told a lie. He perjured himself. Okay, so you have to always be careful when you answer questions with people that probably have bad intentions. But no, it's the questions were very routinely answered by me.
The special counsel's investigation has resulted in indictments of at least 30 people and 3 companies. 4 former Trump campaign aides pled guilty to charges brought by the special counsel. The president maintains there was no collusion between his campaign and Russia. He says he expects the probe to end soon. Eric?
Yeah, it may be winding down. Ellison, thank you. Marthel?
Eric, thank you. And for more on this now, we're going to bring in John Bussey. He's the associate editor for the Wall Street Journal. So, John, first of all, I mean, did the president answer these 140 questions by himself or with the help of his attorneys? I mean, it doesn't seem to make sense that he would do this alone. And why would he say that?
Yeah. Well, we have a president who wants to convey the notion that he's in charge and he's answering his own questions and he's kind of running his own show. The truth is something different. Our reporter, Rebecca Ballhaus, has a story on this right now on WSJ.com. The lawyers have been all over this. They've taken the lead in answering the questions in consultation with the president. And that's the way he should want it to be. The lawyers are there to protect him. What you want to have is consistent answers, simple answers. You don't want to go too far. You want to just answer the question. And you want to make sure that it's not something that later on Mueller can find a way to contradict.
Now, naturally, for some, when you hear that the lawyers are helping, as you point out, which makes sense in a situation like this, some might think that that means that there's some sort of untruths being presented or intentional omissions. I mean, can we have faith in what they're submitting to the special counsel?
We won't know. We won't know until Mueller's investigative team has taken the response from the president and evaluated it and measured it against other facts that they know to be facts, and then come back to the president. We don't know also where we stand in this. This is probably not the end. This is the sort of initial answers from the president. Maybe what's happening here is that Mueller is establishing a benchmark against which the president and others will be measured on, the facts of the case. Look, also, the House is in the middle of, the sound that you hear is the electron microscope being rolled out by the House. They're going to be taking up their own investigation of a lot of this as well. Mind you, the answers to these questions are only about collusion. The lawyer said it's not about obstruction of justice. That's a whole other area that Mueller is investigating.
And that those types of questions could be presented in the future.
Yeah, I think that's right. This has gone back and forth many times. Remember, they were talking about a sit-down. The president was going to sit down with Mueller.
And he said, I want to do it. Let me talk to them. I want to talk to him myself.
Right. We've gone through several chapters of this, and it wouldn't be unreasonable to expect that this is just another chapter, right? This is answer the questions, and then there'll probably be more questions presented.
A couple things. As we already know, Mr. Mueller has the answers. So you're saying that this is sort of a benchmark, a threshold, if you will, to see kind of where, how far he has to go moving forward. That said, and we keep hearing that this is almost over. Is it really almost over? How do we know that? How can we tell that at this juncture?
Yeah, we don't. We don't know. Remember, this time last year, there was all this discussion. It's going to be over by Christmas, and it's a year later now. Look, the answers may come in, and Mueller may say, something, this all jibes with everything else we've heard, and there's no collusion, and let's move on. Or it may be one more piece of the puzzle that Mueller is trying to put together. And he needs to go back to the president, or he needs to go back to other sources. Remember, there's a lot of people now who have pled guilty, saying that they're going to cooperate with Mueller. And this may be a moment when Mueller goes back to them and say, look, the president told us this. Is this, in your memory, what actually happened?
I have to wrap it quickly. Will the president keep speaking out about this publicly while this is in play?
This is the president's strategy, is to sort of denigrate the investigation in an effort to delegitimize it should it be negative, should the findings ultimately be negative. I don't think that you're going to see that stop happening.
John Bussey, Wall Street Journal, WSJ.com as well for more.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much. Eric?
All right, Art Thel and John, thank you. Well, in California, the air quality getting worse, forcing people to wear masks to protect themselves from the thick wildfire smoke. So how long exactly will it take before the air there finally clears up? And President Trump is on the ground in California at this hour. He is surveying the overwhelming damage and meeting with first responders. We'll have the latest on his visit and the efforts to try and see some of the remnants there of the motorcade as he goes to see some of these areas. And later, we'll be meeting with victims who lost everything. These overwhelming fires on both ends of the state have destroyed thousands of homes so far. At least 71 people have been killed, and more than 1,000 of our fellow Americans remain unaccounted for because of all this. We have Fox News team coverage meteorologist Adam Klotz will look at the dangers in the air. The air quality is really bad in large parts of the Golden State. But first, let's go to Jonathan Hunt, who's in his old neighborhood of Malibu, which has been so hardly hit, just so devastating and evacuated. Hi, Jonathan.
Hey, Eric, good afternoon to you. President Trump, as you say, up north right now, looking at the hardest hit of all the areas throughout the fires that we have had to deal with here in California over the last week or so. Paradise, California, a town almost completely and utterly destroyed. It will no doubt take the president's breath away, seeing the images up there up close, as it has done for all of our staff who have been up there working so hard over the past week or so. And the president obviously there to thank first responders and to offer comfort to those who have lost everything. Now, we do not know the precise nature of the president's movements after he leaves Northern California, but he is expected to head down to Southern California. And when he gets here, he will find similar scenes like this here in Malibu. People who, when they eventually are allowed back into this neighborhood, and that's likely days or even weeks away, they will find they have pretty much nothing to come to. On this street, which you're right, Eric, is a street that I used to live on, I would say something like a dozen homes have been completely destroyed, and it's a pretty short dead-end street, this one, so you get a dozen homes on a street like this, and it really is devastating for this kind of neighborhood. One other thing, obviously we have been dealing with a lot of tragedy here in Southern California over the last 10 days or so. The borderline bar and grill shooting in which 12 innocent people were massacred, also on the president's agenda today. That was revealed by the press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, speaking in an interview on the Hannity show last night. She said the president will also be meeting some of those impacted by that shooting. Eric?
Yeah, it promises to be quite an emotional visit for the president. Jonathan, thank you. Arthel?
And as Jonathan was saying, the air quality in California is also very dangerous. Let's take a look now at the smog over San Francisco. Almost zero visibility there. Wildfire smoke in that picture that we showed a second ago. Wildfire smoke has skyrocketed the state's air pollution levels, and now Northern California has the worst air quality in the world. Meteorologist Adam Klotz is in the Fox Extreme Weather Center, and that's over like China?
Yeah, in the entire world. Arthel, these are massive fires, and what happens is, unfortunately, the smoke doesn't have anywhere to go. So we do have air quality alerts across large portions of Northern California at this point. Everything in the gray, and when you see an area like this, if you're in one of these areas currently highlighted, this is from the National Weather Service. It's suggested children or the elderly do not go out in this. Anyone with respiratory issues does not go out in this. And even a generally healthy adult shouldn't be outside running or something like that, where you're really breathing in some of these heavy particles that are in the air. But this is where we're currently concerned. And what happens is, with such huge fires, there just isn't anywhere for this smoke to go. Here's kind of the setup, and you can see it with our forecasted winds. You've got the Sierra Nevada mountains on the eastern edge of California. On the western side, you get the coastal ranges. So you have a valley. The smoke, the smog, it all kind of settles in there, and it really has nowhere to go. This is our forecasted winds here in the next couple of days. You get the winds kind of pushing everything down into these valleys. Occasionally, you'll see some of this wind kind of sneak out through and get into places like we saw in San Francisco or Oakland. So it is possible that some of that smog moves that way, some of that smoke moves that way, but heavily in these valleys, unfortunately, it's going to be stuck there probably until Tuesday or Wednesday, till some rain knocks us out. It is going to be completely dry and clear throughout the rest of today. You're seeing our forecast. The humidity is still very low, so that's going to continue to fuel fires. We still have high fire danger in a large area there in Northern California. I do want to get to our future cast here before I send it back. We stay completely dry through the weekend into Monday and Tuesday. There is a little bit of relief on the horizon. Arthel, this is what we're looking at. Perhaps on Wednesday we see some rain move in, and it's not until then actually that those air quality alerts are going to go away. The rain kind of comes in and knocks some of those particles out of the air.
Yeah, well, let's hope for sure, because as you were saying, that the smog, it's kind of trapped in by the mountains in the hills there.
Another 4 or 5 days.
All right, Adam Klotz, thank you. Eric?
Well, I thought back to Washington. You know, it's a surprising endorsement, perhaps politically motivated with a bit of a wink, or maybe now not. President Trump throwing his support behind Nancy Pelosi in her bid to become the Speaker of the House again. The president even offering to drum up Republican votes as she seeks the gavel. This coming as Ms. Pelosi faces growing resistance within the Democratic rank and file. And there's a growing list of those who say they will not vote for her. Garrett Tenney has more from a Washington bureau.
Right now, Nancy Pelosi doesn't have the votes she needs to become Speaker. At least 17 Democrats are openly opposing her, and a couple dozen others are undecided. Pelosi is known as a deal maker, though, and she's been busy meeting with lawmakers this week to try and win them over. Today, she got a big endorsement from none other than President Trump, who said he's willing to get Republicans to vote for her to put her on top.
I would help Nancy Pelosi if she needs some votes. She may need some votes. I will perform a wonderful service for her. I like her. Can you believe it? I like Nancy Pelosi. I mean, she's tough and she's smart, but she deserves to be Speaker.
That's not necessarily an endorsement Pelosi was looking for, though, and this week she was adamant that she'll win the speakership with Democratic votes. Congresswoman Marcia Fudge is one of the Democrats considering challenging Pelosi for the top job as Speaker. On Friday, the two met for 45 minutes behind closed doors to discuss what it would take for Fudge to support Pelosi. Afterwards, Fudge said she plans to make a decision over Thanksgiving.
Sometimes you just need a different voice. Sometimes you just need a different kind of a vision. But I want to be clear that I have not said anything negative about Nancy because I think she's a very, very good leader.
Many of Pelosi's critics believe she's been in power for too long and pushed younger lawmakers to the side. So one possibility being discussed to appease those concerns is Pelosi agreeing to limit herself to 2 years as Speaker and then stepping aside to let new leadership take the reins. Eric?
All right, Garrett. We'll see. Thanks. Arthel?
Well, Eric, as we said, President Trump is in Northern California. We have live pictures here of the president on the ground in Paradise, California, which is one of the most hardest, if not the most hardest hit area of this entire tragedy. There, the president standing amongst the rubble, amongst what was people's lives and perhaps people. As we are still there, the firefighters and rescuers and workers are desperately trying to take any sort of DNA matches that are possibly to somehow find those who are still missing. And authorities are very adamant about pointing out that the missing does not necessarily mean a death toll because they are working diligently to find and find everyone. You've got a lot of elderly people who lived here in Paradise who may not have had smartphones and ways to get out. So it's possible and hopeful that they're just missing and did not get trapped in the horrible blaze there. And you see reporters and the whole crew, of course, watching the president as he surveys the damage. I'd love to hear his innermost thoughts right now. Because as you know, Eric, from covering devastating tragedies like this, it's worse in person. It's worse in person.
It is something when you see it on television and these images that we see, just try to imagine that if that was your neighborhood or your home. When you go to and cover a disaster or devastation like we have, it is incomprehensible, really. When you see it for yourself, when you're on the ground, when you see those sights, when you smell the acrid smoke, when you get the whole feeling of a neighborhood and a town that has been destroyed. The damage is overwhelming. It can emotionally really hit you when you see it for the very first time with your own eyes, as opposed to seeing it the images on television. No matter how much we can describe it, you don't know what it's like until you step foot on it there. Mm-hmm. And that certainly is what the president is seeing there now.
And the president is there along with Governor Jerry Brown and Governor-elect Gavin Newsom, as today is certainly not the day for politics. And hopefully they can get together and come together for the people there in Paradise, California, Thousand Oaks, and everywhere else in Northern and Southern California who really need assistance. You have people living in tents now, people who were once completely safe,